Deathworlders to the Extreme by Aquastar Dark. Chapter 18. Nap? Nah. Summary. Crying is exhausting, and Aizawa is confused. It had, it had been nearly a whir by the time Shinso had calmed down, and by then Shoto and Shinso had relocated to the ground. Shinso tucked below Shoto's broken arm, and fast asleep. They must have been exhausted, emotionally and physically, thought Shota as the Deathworlder's chest gently rose and fell with every breath. He felt guilty, of course, for sending Shinso into such distress, but they had fallen asleep and knew that he'd made a mistake. Maybe I should avoid asking questions relating to their home planet for now. But at this point, it was a little past midday, and Shinso was already asleep. Yet, Shota had seen them nest up in the tree while it was dark. I wonder if whether they're nocturnal or diurnal. Can't pronounce that. Maybe their species is neither. Possibly so that they're awake to handle any situation. Shota would be lying if he wasn't tired. The average Vimmu slept for over half their life, and Shota hadn't slept properly in I can't even remember when. Even so, no matter how inviting a nap under the local star sounded, he couldn't let himself forget that he was on a death world. That meant one wrong move could mean his death, and the death of Shinso who was sleeping. The reality of their situation is that they couldn't risk sleeping out in the open unless one of them was keeping guard. And right now, that guard is me. You couldn't exactly get up to do things either. It was an obvious rule that if somebody falls asleep on you, you can't move around lest you disturb them from their slumber. This was particularly the case considering that Shinzo is a death worlder, and, friendly or not, anyone could become violent when woken. Shinso shifted in their sleep, slight murmurs escaping them as they burrowed their face into Shoto's uniform. They may not be a kitten, but they sure act like one. It was amusing, really, how, despite Shinso's adolescence, they were still rather childish. At least by Mimu standards, anyway. Perhaps by Deathworlder standards, they were incredibly mature, or perhaps it was just being on an alien death world that resulted in them falling back on childhood habits. Who knew? Not Shota. Shinso's, Shinso's movements grew over the cliffs until they turned over in their sleep. At least twice, and nearly bashed their head against a rock before Shota stilled their head with a couple more loops of his scarf around the Death Worlder's head. They must not be sleeping well if they're moving that much. Shota had similar experiences in the past, a result of the trauma he experienced during Obero's death. When that happened, he had taken to wrapping himself up in a scarf or burrowing into a multitude of bedding for comfort whenever he woke up whining, and often ended up praying to himself when that occurred. Considering how Shinso was moving around, it seemed that they needed the comfort. As quickly as he dared, Shota lifted Shinso's head and wrapped it in his scarf, before lowering it down and began to slowly, the Death Worlder's movements begin to slow, until eventually Shinso was almost entirely still. Breathing gently, at least that's something for universal. Shota bit back a yawn to avoid disturbing the Death Worlder, and instead of resigning himself to stillness, as he gazed upon the surrounding area. The greenery around was nice, he had to admit. Not many trees to grow as tall as the ones here, though he doubted that would have stopped him from climbing them as a kid. I wonder if it's possible that Shinso doesn't live in a tree and that's only a species had in the past. No, then he wouldn't have known how to climb that tree in the first place, let alone injured. Saliva leaked out of Shinso's mouth as he shifted, and Shota felt his ear twitch as some of it soaked into his uniform. Well, that can't be good. I doubt Shinto spit is venomous. It shouldn't be much of a problem for it to get on me. But considering that liquid leaking out of someone isn't particularly good. Carefully, he tucked his good arm under Shinto's head and lifted off the ground, and used his scarf to shut the deathwolder's mouth, only for it to drop open again when he released it. This isn't good. Good. If too much liquid was drained from Shinto's body, then they would become badly, it says hydrated, but I suppose it's dehydrated. Become badly dehydrated and possibly even die. Okay, Deathworlder with liquid leaking from their body, not ideal. I have no idea how to work this, but it could be best for me to wake it up, since it likely knows what it's doing with itself. Another thought occurred to Shota. Oh stars, if it was poison that's foaming out its mouth from its delayed reaction. A little more urgently, Shota tried to figure out a solution. It would be best for me to wake it up, but I have no idea how violently it might wake up, so it would be best for me to wake it up from the distance. As slowly and carefully as he could, Shota gently unwrapped his scarf from the Deathworlder's head, making him scoot away from them, only to be forced to stop when he realized that a piece of his uniform was still being clutched by the Deathworlder. For a moment, Shota panicked, thinking that they had woken up already and were going to kill him, only to sigh in relief when he found Shinto still sleeping peacefully. And then seemed to keep them falling out of trees then? Asked Shota as he carefully removed the loose grip from his clothing and got up to move away. He froze as gently murmurs emerged from the now squirming Deathworlder, and quickly backed away to the pile of resources safe from the ship. They're waking up. I'll give them some water. That should placate them enough until the tiredness from waking up wears off, and should help them replace the water they lost from their saliva leaking out. For a click or two, not much changed with Shinto, aside from their movements, emotion increasing until suddenly they sat up, eyes wide as they stared at Shota. This is it, he thought, readying himself to run. This is the moment where they attack if waking up for them is violent. But Shinto did nothing but breathe heavily, staring at Shota. He offered the packet of water, and Shinto got up shakily like his legs were injured. One of them is, reminded Shota's brain. They'll need to see a doctor. Shota met them in the middle as Shinto began to move forward and head into the water to the Deathworlder. They didn't look at him as they accepted it from Shota and took it off of the cap before holding it to their mouth. You just squeeze the bag to get the water into your mouth, instructed Shota, perhaps just for the sake of instruction, as Shinto only held the packet to their mouth, staring at him. Here, I'll show you. Shota grabbed another packet from the pile. It was about time he had water anyway, and making sure Shinto was paying attention to his actions, popped up the lid before squeezing the cool liquid into his mouth where his tongue could lap it up. Unfortunately, Shinto didn't mimic his actions, only stared at him for a moment before glancing at his packet as they took it from their mouth. Then, to Shota's horror, they squeezed it despite it not being in his mouth. His mouth! We can't afford to waste resources. But nothing came out. Shota blinked. It was empty? No wonder Shinto was confused. Holding up his own packet in his mouth by his teeth, Shota grabbed another packet from the pile and handed it to Shinto, though not before shaking it to make sure there was still water in it beforehand. The Deathworlder simply held it in their mouth like earlier, and Shota sighed before squeezing his own packet demonstratively. Shinto didn't mimic his actions, only stared at him for a few ticks. The packet filled their mouth until he popped it out and handed it to Shota. It was empty. How? The hallways were near incomprehensible as Hitoshi wandered through the ship, his surroundings swirling and changing color. It was kind of pretty, but he didn't pay much attention to that as he searched for the exit. He was on Earth, and he wanted to go outside. Why? He didn't know. Only that he had to walk on the grass and pet some cats. That didn't sound so bad, so he kept searching. Only things began to feel off as one of the guards he passed fell to the ground without any real reason. Just fell over. Odd. But he continued. There was a few couple of doorways, so Itoshi opened them to find the room filled with dirt and metal. Nothing of interest. He continued on. There was only one more door in the hallway, and suddenly there were no more hallways at all, only the door. It was locked, but fortunately Hitoshi had the key. So after multiple failed attempts, he opened it. What met him aside had him screaming as cold enveloped his body there. Lying on the table was Aizawa. His eyes stared blankly as blood streamed from the deep wound all over his body, and feather doctor that cut him open laughed as Hitoshi stared in horror. He ran forward, but no matter how hard he pushed the doctor, he was thrown off, as Aizawa's dying body stared at him. Save me. Save me, it seemed to say, as Hitoshi threw himself again and again to push the doctor from the cat alien. Leave him alone, he cried, screaming. The doctor paid him no mind as two people entered the room. A pale woman with tired eyes and an evil smirk, and a tall man with purple hair that seemed to hide his features from the world. So good, such a good son to help us, said Hitoshi. So good, such a good son to help us, said Hitoshi's father, as Hitoshi found himself holding the scalpel that was moving towards Aizawa's precious scarf. No matter how much he screamed or tried to stop, he just kept moving the scalpel towards Aizawa, as his parents stood behind him, congratulating him as the walls around him began to crumble like aluminum. The sight of Aizawa's cold, betrayed eyes were burned into his mind as the walls closed around him. Toshi shot up, breathing heavily as the world spun around him. Where am I? Where's Aizawa? The movement in the corner of his eyes alerted him to Aizawa standing a little way in the front of him, holding something in his only arm that wasn't broken. Aizawa held forward the packet in his paw, and shakily Hitoshi got up and walked over to the cat alien. Rivets of pain ran up and down his legs as he approached, but he ignored them and accepted the pouch he recognized to be for water from Aizawa. He couldn't even look at Aizawa's kind, cat-like face without the image of his nightmare springing forward, and he sipped silently on the water as Aizawa began to say something. He glanced up, and Aizawa grabbed another packet of water and met eyes with Hitoshi as he popped open the cap and began to slowly squeeze it. Lapping up the water as he stared at Hitoshi. Hitoshi glanced at his own packet of water. Does he want me to lap it up too? No, I won't do that. I'll only waste water that way. He was done anyway, so he simply took the packet out of his mouth and squeezed it upon meeting Aizawa's gaze. Aizawa stared at him for a few seconds before getting another packet from the resource pile, shaking it, and then handing it to Hitoshi. Right, I should be drinking more water. Hitoshi drank quickly, the pleasant coolness soaking his dry throat, but paused as Aizawa huffed and squeezed his own packet. What does he want from me? Thought Hitoshi as he finished the water. Why does he want me to drink it by squeezing the water out like a jelly packet? Why would I do that? The packet was done, anyway, so Hitoshi handed it to Aizawa and watched with confusion and slight amusement, as the cat alien made a slight sound as he shook the packet. I wonder what that's about, thought Hitoshi, as he took the opportunity to get his staff during Aizawa's confusion. No matter. I think I'm going to look around the wreckage side a bit. The staff eased the weight off his ankle, and he breathed a sigh of relief. If we're going to stay here for the night, I think I'm going to look for something that can help me start a campfire. that's the end of that chapter, and on to the next. The chapter name is Rocks, capitalized, and summary is Shinto prepares. Aizawa was confused. If Shadow were to say that he didn't panic when Shinto disappeared, he would be lying. The moment he realized that Shinto was gone, having wandered off during his bewilderment. Seriously, how did they do that? He turned. Seriously, how did they do that? In all of directions, ears spinning as he called out Shinto's name in a spur of the moment terror. Where did they go? Did they get picked up by a predator? I can't save them if that happens. Aizawa. Shinto rose from behind a fallen tree, and Shoda nearly collapsed with relief as the deathworlder called his name once more. Approaching him, in one hand they held their stick, the one they risked wandering on their injuries for, and in the other were a few small rocks. Are the two they already have not enough? Why do you give me these heart attacks for junk, Shinso? Shinzo tossed the rocks into a little camp and glanced at Shota for a moment before looking away. Shota tugged gently downwards at Shinto with his scarf, but it seemed that Shinzo had enough with resting for the day and gently batted away Shota's scarf began to water around the crash site, surrounding forest some more, using the stick like cane. They were using it to make up for the weakness in their leg and take off the pressure off their foot. Off of it too. Shota realized as Shota realized as Shinto leaned on the stick with every step. Since they spent so long searching for it earlier, I assume they've been using it for a while as support. Since they've been spent so long searching for it earlier, I assume they've been using it for a while as support. Clever Deathworlder and a problem child. Just rest. Slowly, Shota sat down and watched Shinso as they continued to pick up rocks and bring them to the campsite. I don't think I'll ever understand Deathworlders ever. It wasn't particularly hard for Hitoshi to find rocks, though he could see why Aizawa had so much trouble finding a good one earlier. Most of them were crumbly pebbles. Still, he managed to find a few half-decent ones to add to the steadily growing pile of rocks in their campsite, since he, unfortunately, couldn't remember which rocks could be struck together to make sparks. He was going in blind as he picked up a pale, sparkly-looking rock. Quartz, maybe? And added it to his collection. Aizawa was near the campsite, staring at the water packet that Hitoshi had served up earlier, and Hitoshi was starting to think he might have upset the cat alien in some way. How? He didn't know. Maybe it had to do with how he didn't follow Aizawa's orders and how to drink from it. Hitoshi shrugged and returned to his task. The closer he went to the crash site, the more debris there was, and the more debris he had to overturn to check for the rocks underneath. There was also some flora that Hitoshi easily brushed aside to check for the rocks, though he did feel back when some of it snapped from a single brush of his hand. His cuts, not particularly healed after a few hours of existence, stung when he overturned debris. They stung when he brushed past some tall grass. They stung when they met the frigging air itself. They stung. Needless to say, Toshi was ignoring his cuts, unless he spent every other second of his task checking them over. Was that smart of him? Not really, but he dealt with worse in the past. I've washed dishes in soapy water while my hands still had glass in them from that vase. I can do this. Of course, it was still irritating when one hand was constantly... It was still irritating with one hand was constantly screaming as he gripped his staff. Shinso! Hitoshi froze at the sudden butchered call of his name and glanced around. What did I do? Am I in trouble? Is he going to hurt me? His mind spun with instincts and thought ingrained from his childhood. Aizawa? Hitoshi hesitantly called back, striving to find an odd sight. Aizawa looked panicked, having honestly just stopped spinning as he stared at Hitoshi with ears suddenly freezing and dripping down to his head. Aizawa? Hitoshi wandered over to the distressed cat alien whose eyes immediately focused on the rocks Hitoshi held, even as Hitoshi added them to the pile. Hitoshi glanced at Aizawa only for the image of Aizawa's dead eyes to cloud his vision for a moment. He looked away. Does he want me to sleep again? No, I gotta work, kitty. Hitoshi resisted Aizawa's scarf as it tried to pull him back into the campsite and gently patted it off him. Aizawa stared at him for a bit before sitting down on the ground, watching him even as his body seemed to try and collapse to the floor. He must be really tired. Did he even sleep when I did? Joshi would be lying if he said it wasn't a bit embarrassing that he cried himself to sleep in the arms of a cat alien. But the idea that Aizawa hadn't slept, instead opted to stay awake, and watch for Toshi was a little concerning. That was nice of him, though, to watch over us. Shut it, brain, snapped Toshi. Toshi gently patted Aizawa's head and he returned with more rocks and settled down next to him. As the cat alien blinked at him, he looked like there was a quarter left of the day. It looked like there was a quarter left of the day. Hopefully, Hitoshi could find the right rocks before dark. Hitoshi gazed down upon the dozen or so rocks that he had collected over the day and picked up a couple that looked different from each other. He gazed down upon them for a moment before striking them against each other with a crash that made Aizawa jump and stare at the rocks in Hitoshi's hands. His scarf huddling close to his neck, Hitoshi frowned at the rocks that did not make a spark as they crashed against each other to try every combination. This might take a while, he sighed. It was nearly sundown by the time Hitoshi was able to find a combination that sparked even after retrieving more and more rocks to try. Though one of the ingredients to it wasn't even a rock, it was a piece of metal. He nearly shrieked with joy as the quartz and the metal made sparks between them, but stopped himself from doing so when he remembered that Aizawa was asleep next to him. The cat alien's chest rose and fell as he slept, and Hitoshi resisted the urge to pet his head like he was a stray cat. Instead, Hitoshi celebrated his victory by clearing a portion of their little campsite of any debris and flora until the floor in that single location was bare. He rearranged the unsuccessful rocks in a circle for a little fire pit before wandering around throughout the wreck site to search for sticks, wood, and dry grass to use as fuel for fire. A particularly fortunate find that Hitoshi made was that part of the tree that had fallen into the ship had broken apart, resulting in large, beautiful chunks of wood that could be used to keep the fire burning throughout the night. Aizawa raised his head and blinked blearily at Hitoshi as he turned with chunks of wood in his grasp and gazed down upon the pile of fuel that Hitoshi had gathered for the fire. The piece of metal and quartz sat in the center of the fire pit where Hitoshi wouldn't forget about them. And the wood was a little ways away so it wouldn't all be accidentally burnt by the flame. Hitoshi wrapped the food and stuff from the ship wreckage in his jacket and brought them to the campsite where it shoved it off the side under Aizawa's curious gaze, which froze as Hitoshi laid his eyes on the biggest freaking bug he'd ever seen in his life. Shaped vaguely like a roly-poly, the bug was fat and brown and the size of a large house cat, and made a light chittering sound as it carelessly walked into their campsite and began to chew on the wood. Aizawa whined and grasped Hitoshi's arm far tighter than he'd ever had before as the cat alien tried to pull Hitoshi away from the alien bug. Hitoshi let Aizawa pull him away from the bug for a moment. Another one of the wood bugs approached the pile of wood and began to chow down like its companion, and at the moment that Hitoshi decided to listen to his growling belly. The bug aliens chittered only a bit as Hitoshi slowly approached them from behind. Spear in hand, he hesitated for only a moment as he spilled before stabbing down the right through the first bug before leaping to the side to do the same to the other. The other fleeing one. The legs of the bug squirmed and writhed on Hitoshi's stick, and he instinctively dropped it to the ground before leaping away. Closer to Aizawa, who stared with them with Toshi as the movements of the bugs began to slow. Glancing at Aizawa, Toshi shrugged at the now still bugs. Dinner? He suggested, as he strolled over to the bugs on the spear and slid them off into the ground with a wet squelch. Aizawa sniffed at the bugs for a moment before Toshi shooed away his maw from the bugs and was plopped down next to the fire pit. They had done a bit of damage to the woodpile, but it was nothing Hitoshi couldn't fix as he returned to the area of the wreck. To retrieve more supplies that began to disappear among the growing shadows. After a moment of consideration, Hitoshi grabbed a large, relatively flat piece of metal and brought it over to the campsite to cook the bugs on. Toshi stared, satisfied at the accumulated supplies he'd gathered within the first few hours. Now it's time to put it into action. Okay, I believe that's the last chapter. Okay, on to notes. I haven't been posted for over a month. You know that whole thing, I'm American, so, you know that whole thing with TikTok, Lemonade, and CapCut being taken down? Well, I was in the middle of making this. Not in the middle, I'd started making this. And boom, CapCut was down. Didn't realize it was CapCut. I only thought that TikTok was going to go down. Didn't realize CapCut would go. It was also the last to go back up for some reason, like days after TikTok. And I'm a CapCut user because free. It's a website. No viruses. It's great. So sorry for not posting. I was in the middle of it. Then once it came back on, I had no energy, blah, blah, blah. I had 7 missing assignments in one of my history classes, which was not great, but whatever. Luckily that teacher let us do missing work without, what's it called? Without, a dock at it for being late, but there's a limit to when the time we could turn in missing work was, so yeah, that was not good, was it? Well, okay, so I love this fic, and we're finally getting to some good parts. We're finally getting into the story. We are on chapter 19 so far of 89. There's so many words in this. There's words. 200,900 words. That's pretty nice. There's no research, but whatever. Still love this fic. I've read it 5-7 times. I don't remember. I've been reading this for over a year and a half ago. It was a while ago, and I've read it a million times in the AMs of the morning, and I don't have great memory of the AMs of the morning. Also, I'm rambling. Also, I have a rambling hour-long video of me playing Raft that I need to export. It's originally in Adobe because Adobe, that was during when CapCut was down, and I was using Adobe, my school Adobe account. The video was so long, it wouldn't export. I need to transfer the video onto CapCut to see if I can post it. Funny how that was supposed to be something we'll do over while I was waiting for CapCut to go back up, but probably gonna end up being posted after this one. Also, I'm just rambling. You don't need to listen to me. But yeah, so that's great. So bye. I'll see you next 2 chapters. If I'm probably gonna do 2 chapters. I like doing that because even though I've read this 100 times, I don't like leaving off with only a chapter. Cause I don't know. Yeah. Peace.